Good afternoon to you all. Just like the Member of Parliament, I am delighted that I won a competition for equestrian performance. So you can see my prize here. We are in the atmosphere of a great school dedicated to the horse sector and to performance in a country that is proud to have 53 breeds of horses and other equines. And thank you very much to the IFC for organizing this morning a great visit of this wonderful Cadre Noir. And thank you also for organizing this European symposium on the horse, an asset for the post-crisis world. And you are right, Mr. Mayor, this is also an asset for today's world. Now, the roundtable that I will be moderating is called The Horse in Agriculture, Health Issues, Sustainable Development and Animal Welfare. This will be a roundtable like all the roundtables this afternoon. It will be a significant roundtable given that we have 7 million equines in Europe occupying 6 million hectares. And you know that the fields are ecosystems. They stock as many CO2 as forests do. This is very important given that the European Union would like to reach carbon neutrality by 2040. And in the end, today's symposium is gathering us around this exceptional animal that mechanization did not exclude from our lives. On the contrary, this is an animal that is coming back thanks to what is being done in the land. For instance, we had, of course, the pandemics, lockdown. This reactivated the will to occupy territory, but also expectations around sustainable development. An animal that gathers culture and nature. There is also an economy of affection. We know very well how much we love this animal, but also strong economy, given that we believe that the turnover thanks to the horse sector in Europe is around 100 billion euros. So horse is creating specific landscapes. It contributes to the wealth of territories. It also allows to provide more value to difficult environments. And the horse creates jobs, many types of business lines as well, more and more. It also feeds in tourism, leisure industry. And in the end, we thought that maybe we could talk about the horse as a tool, but no, the horse is today a friend, occupying its full place in today's society that we thought was being less and less material, more and more digital. But no, we are coming back to fundamental values. To moderate this roundtable, I will be calling 2 members of parliament and 3 veterinarians. First, Martine Leguil-Ballois, member of the French Assemblée Nationale for Vendée. You are a lawyer. You chair the horse group within the National Assembly. Please stay seated. I will be calling you on stage later. And you work in a societal movement, and the well-being of the horse is one of your major concerns. You work on this, you agree with Mr. Rolly Owers, who's a vet. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. So you are a vet in training. You are the executive director of World Horse Welfare. You will be talking with us the stakes of well-being of horses in agriculture, where the horse is coming back on behalf of sustainable development, but you also committed in many different institutions, making sure that horse well-being is granted. The Professor Didier Certain will be talking about this as well. Mr. Certain, please come on the stage. You are a vet as a training, and you are the president of the European Horse Center in Wallonia, Belgium. You will be talking with us the use of horses as a working horse in the Ardennes forests. And then the last 2 speakers, first on horse health, Mr. Goran Ackerström, FEI Veterinary Director. And you will be talking about the health of the horse. Well, very well done for stepping on stage as you should. So you will be talking about the health of the horse, given that you are working very closely with the International Organization for Animal Health. So we will be talking about this with you. And then we will have the member of the European Parliament, Mr. Jérémy Decercle, who will be concluding today's roundtable with 3 hats, a former president of the Young Farmers coming from a family of breeders in Bourgogne-Franche-Comté and completely involved as an MEP in the European strategy that is actually working on biodiversity and sustainable development. So the strategy fork to farm, or rather farm to fork, sorry. Madam Member of Parliament, you have the floor.
C'est bon, là, ça marche. Merci beaucoup, Sylvie.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for having given me the floor, and thank you very much to the organizers for having given me the opportunity to talk to you about horses. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to do it, so there's never enough time for those of us who love them so much. But I would like to come back onto 1 or 2 things that have already been said. Director, sir, you talked about the horse in France. You said that it could be found in arts and other areas. The image of the horse is something that you cannot separate from the image of France, even abroad. Nobody thinks about France without thinking about horses. The Cadre Noir that is renowned throughout the world, the Garde Républicaine, the mounted gendarmes, the Arc de Triomphe that is in Paris, the different breeds of French horses, the trotters. There are all sorts of things in France that mean that France and the horse are inseparable. And I would like to come back to something that nobody has brought up, perhaps Sylvie to a certain extent. This is an animal that can help economically. The horses are profitable for us, but they're not just profitable, they are our friends as well. However, we must not forget that legally speaking, the horse is an earner in France. And that is a legal concept that we must not forget. It is, of course, an animal that is bred. It is an animal that is used for economic purposes. And I'm stressing this because you know that currently there is a movement that simply wants to make the horse a pet. And if that were ever to come about, things would change entirely. If horses were only recognized as pets, then I don't think that we would still have the Cadre Noir. I don't think we would have the mounted police, the Garde Républicaine. I don't think you would see as many horses scattered throughout our countryside. And God knows to what extent these horses actually participate to breathing life into our territories. As you said, Mayor, sir, with Saumur without the Cadre Noir would not be Saumur. We also have racing courses that give life to our countryside with all of our breeders who breed for the big races, races that are followed the world over. It just shows to us that the horse is not just a pet. The horse is a profitable entity. And the horse is also a source of employment. Direct employment in our countryside, and I'll talk about France because that's what I know best. We have 66,000 jobs thanks to the horse. The horse is a true source of jobs, and I don't think that we have yet explored every way in which a horse can be the source of a job. There are all sorts of other uses that horses could be used for ecological reasons. They are also used for maintaining and caring for our countryside. I discovered the Vendée region because I discovered their horse riding pathways there. I think that people dream, we often dream when we love horses to go and work in the horse world, but today it's quite curious. There are a lot of schools, apprentice schools for young people who want to work in the horse sector, but we do not have enough. We don't have enough lads. We don't have enough jockeys. We don't have enough horse trainers, riders. So it's interesting to see that, because at a time when we are talking so much about sustainable development, there are all sorts of things that we are lacking. Vets, for example. We are lacking in vets. And I don't just think this is in France. I think it is everywhere in Europe. There, too, you have to give people the desire to come back to the countryside. And maybe the horse will be able to do that. It will be able to attract vets. Of course, they can't just do that, but at least this would be something that would be worthy of our examination. We need more vets in the countryside. And you also talked about animal welfare. I'd like to repeat your words again. Because this is a profitable animal, because it is a friend, because it is an animal that gives us so much. We've talked about handicap, we've talked about how the happiness that it procures, how it can be used for those with psychological problems. Well, I don't know for you, but for me, when I am out riding, I am always proud. When you're a child, every child dreams of riding a horse and can feel proud once they have done it. And quite frankly, to think that animal welfare for horses is something today that is very often ignored, then all we could hope for is that it will be further developed. It's not that there is no animal welfare at all. It's not that the animals are not overall happy, because you all know that nobody could ride a horse or go out for hacking if the horses were not happy. Of course, there are things that can be improved. In Europe, everybody's talking about the transporting of horses, and you'll hear about that later. In France, this year, we have adopted a law on nephrectomy. Nephrectomy is something that up until now was more or less accepted, although it was forbidden, but it still did exist. And it's true that when you're talking about animal welfare, if there was one thing that had to be prohibited, it was nephrectomy. People who ignore the functioning or how horses work, if you suddenly learn that despite certain pathologies, you can always continue to find a use for a horse, then there is not much hope for us all. That's unacceptable. There's also the capacity for the owners of horses. We know that at the moment there's been a lot of work done at the National Assembly, l'Assemblée Nationale, for example, thinking that if everybody had to learn about animal welfare for the Olympic Games that will be held in Paris. But be it in Europe or France or other member states or at high levels or other levels, I think that there have been considerable efforts made. And if we want to talk about the different sectors, all of these sectors are concerned with the welfare of horses. We see sometimes in racetracks, in races, we see within the FEI, we see all of the work that has been done, and I hope that I haven't forgotten anybody. I haven't forgotten the French Working Horse Society, the SFET, for example. Have I forgotten? The SHF, the IFCE, the technical institutes. Everybody is currently working on the welfare of the horse. Everybody wants the horse to be treated as a friend, but we still have not done everything that we could have. There is such room for improvement. Thank you very much. You were fascinating to listen to, and I'm now going to turn the floor to Mr. Rolly Owers, the Executive Director of World Horse Welfare.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here. I am very sorry I can't speak to you in French. I am from the UK, but I have brought the weather with me. Those of you who have heard me speak before know that I do like to make a few jokes. But after what happened in the Oscars on Sunday night, I may keep my jokes down this year. And obviously, it's April Fool's Day, so I don't know who's going to come onto the stage. But I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you today and participate in this conference on the future of horses in France, the EU, and Europe. Being someone from the UK, unfortunately, I have to distinguish between EU and Europe nowadays, but that's for another day. But it's such a relevant topic in this historic location. And I was fascinated. It was lovely to hear from the mayor of Saumur, and I assumed that the #1 requirement for being the mayor of Saumur was to have a horse background. And it was wonderfully refreshing to see someone who isn't from a horse background but has such a passion for horses. I suppose you don't have much choice in Saumur, but it certainly shone through, Mayor, your passion for horses. It was lovely to see. And of course, Saumur has such a long equestrian tradition, and I loved the motto of a famous Cadre Noir commanding officer, Colonel Loire. The cult of tradition does not exclude the love of progress. And I think for us in the equestrian world, it's something that we have to take very seriously, because we have great tradition in the equestrian world, but we have to embrace change at the same time. So I just want to very briefly, don't know quite where I'm pressing there, to introduce you to World Horse Welfare. I don't seem to be able to, am I pressing this the wrong way? Oh, there we go. Okay. World Horse Welfare is an international charity that was founded nearly 100 years ago. And at the heart of what World Horse Welfare is all about was founded on preventing the long-distance transport of horses for slaughter. But what the charity does stand for is very much for the horse-human partnership. And as we've already heard this today, that partnership can take so many different forms: as a sport animal, as an animal for leisure, as a farm animal, and as a therapy animal, and as so many other sorts. And World Horse Welfare has a very close association with the European Union over so many years. And whilst we aren't founding members of the European Horse Network, we are delighted to be involved with the European Horse Network for over a decade. Now, of course, France has a very strong tradition in equitation. Unlike my ability to move the slide. And France can rightly be viewed, as we've already heard, as a world leader in protecting equine welfare, with its newly proposed animal welfare protection laws, which will require a licensing for horse owners requiring a knowledge of equine management, a requirement to have an animal welfare reference person on any establishment housing equidae as part of a professional activity, and the recording of veterinary procedures, including neurectomies, in the equine identification document. Now, there we go. Horses also have a unique place in our society. As we've already heard, they're the most versatile animals that play many, many different roles. So important to understand that many factors that put horse welfare at risk, some of them are shared by all horses, but some risk factors may have a high impact in horse bred for a specific purposes. For example, horses bred for dressage, or for polo, or for endurance, or for racing. But the focus for today is on horses in agriculture. And whilst I will focus on animal welfare, through the concept of one health and one welfare, this is inextricably linked to the other two issues of this round table, namely human health and sustainable development. So horses in agriculture can be livestock there we go. Can be livestock raised for human consumption, or working animals used in agriculture for traction, or indeed they can be both. Their welfare can be jeopardized by many factors, from poor handling to inadequate turnout to ineffective disease control. And so the welfare concerns in livestock horses very much relate to their uniqueness. Horses can change throughout their lives. For example, a sport horse may become a leisure horse and then become livestock. Horses do not cope well with intensively reared systems and will suffer from obesity and related health conditions like equine metabolic syndrome and laminitis. And horses are also the most transported animal of any of the species, and any transportation can be a stressful and tiring experience. So the welfare of animals during the transport can be impacted by many factors, from the fitness of the equine, for the journey length, to watering and feeding intervals. So, whilst there are risks, there are huge benefits too, as we've already heard. They have proved to be green assets to agricultural production, as their use has limited environmental impact. Working horses can play a role in sustainable land management, and horsepower is a sustainable resource with beneficial environmental effects. And we have seen the re-emergence of small business farms showing increasing interest in low-carbon, organic, self-supporting farming. As an example, here in France, we are seeing the growing use of horses, especially by the organic wine sector. And I know the wine of Saumur is especially good after that. But we obviously need, as we've heard, consider their welfare and ensure that it is better protected. Because this shift in use is not always matched by a good understanding and knowledge of the horse's needs and welfare, or having the premises or finances to properly provide for these animals. As a sector, we must emphasise the need for good welfare practices, no matter how a horse is used. So let's just briefly reflect on a number of welfare issues. It has been proved time and time again, ever since the horse meat scandal of 2013, when the European Union requested World Horse Welfare and Eurogroup to undertake a stocktake of equine issues across Europe. And we know that a lack of education and ignorance is one of the biggest threats to equine welfare. Sticking to traditional or cultural methods may negatively impact on the welfare of the horse if they are not compatible with the most up-to-date scientific evidence on what provides good welfare. And just one example, we understand so much more now about how horses learn and how harsh tactics or punishment of the horse do not have any place in equine training. Exchange of knowledge is essential, and of course the IFCE plays such an important role in that. People involved in the use, handling or training of equines must have the knowledge of the behaviour of horses in order to meet their natural needs and guarantee their welfare. And a great example of this is the IFCE working together with the French Wine and Vine Institute to develop courses for horse keepers to provide skills in weeding and ploughing vineyards with draft horses. Secondly, a lack of suitable accommodation and tack. This introduces the concept of the 5 provisions. We so often think about animal welfare, about the avoidance of negative experiences, but it's equally about the promotion of positive experiences. So, for example, their accommodation and shelter must be built, bearing in mind the needs of those horses, and essentially it must be safe and dry. Inappropriate foot trimming can cause major issues. Inappropriate dental care can cause major issues. Both of these actions need to be performed by qualified professionals. And unsuitable equipment, especially with harnessing, can have significant negative impacts on equine welfare. Thirdly, a lack of turnout and social isolation. And it was wonderful to see on our tour this morning how the IFCE and how the Cadre Noir here in Saumur is really open up to the needs of the 3 Fs, as we call in equine welfare: friends, freedom, and forage. That's where our horses have come from an evolutionary perspective, and we can never forget that. Stabling horses for long periods can have a significant negative impact on their welfare. So they must be given access to outside space with other equines whenever possible. Horses are also gregarious animals and can become anxious and insecure if isolated from other horses. Fourthly, and I know I don't want to tread on Joran's toes, because when we can talk about the health of horses, and what is really important to remember, a horse can have good health. It doesn't necessarily mean it has good welfare. If it has good welfare, by definition, it will have good health. And therefore, it's so important that we prevent, as far as we can, the spread of infectious diseases. And we only have to look over the last 2 years to think of the equine influenza outbreak of 2019 or the equine herpes virus outbreak of last year and going into this year. But there are other threats like West Nile virus and African horse sickness. And also, with regards to prevention of disease, it is so important to remember our horsemanship, because it's so, if you know what the normal for your horse is, if they are developing a disease, you'll be able to tell very, very quickly through their behavioral change that they are not all is well. And then finally, a lack of effective equine identification and traceability. There is still a crying out lack of compliance with equine identification across Europe, in France, in the UK, and in every other member state of the EU. And this lack of traceability is a real issue when it comes to the risk of equine welfare when we are facing a disease outbreak. So finally, what are the solutions? It is recognising the importance of good welfare for horses used in agriculture and the virtuous link between health, welfare and productivity. It's about investing in education and training of all the personnel, as each of them can provide with their equines with positive or negative experiences. It's about improving the current EU rules, including a review of Council Directive 98/58, referencing the protection of animals kept for farming purposes to address factors affecting equine welfare, and to use existing knowledge on horse welfare, such as related legislation in EU member states, and also the EU guides to good welfare practice for the keeping of horses and donkeys, to be able to promote these widely. And we must, as a sector, invest in more research to better understand the factors that create good and bad welfare and impact a horse's role on its well-being. So it's vital we don't leave our equines behind. It is essential that the importance of their welfare is understood and addressed by anyone involved with horses and by the industry. Horses are a major asset in this post-crisis world. Let's think about the way we keep horses in the future to ensure they make maximum benefit to both agriculture and communities, the environment and agroecology, whilst providing good welfare and positive experiences. Horses have a huge role to play, but for so many different reasons, consideration of their welfare cannot be left behind. Merci beaucoup.
Alors, j'étais très inquiète au départ parce qu'il avait...
Well, I was very worried when I started off because he had 30 slides, but you can see that he got through them with great panache. So well done. It was fascinating to listen to you. And there's one key phrase that I would like to remember, and that is the cult of tradition does not exclude looking for progress. And of course, the awareness of horse welfare is of prime importance. Thank you so much. Thank you for your 3 Fs, freedom, forage, and friends. That is what we will remember, amongst other things, of course, from your speech. I'm now going to give the floor to the next speaker. Mr. Certain will take the floor now. And Mr. Certain is going to talk to us about the use of the horse in the Ardennes region of France. Thank you very much. Could I have the pointer, please, on my first slide? Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having invited me here this afternoon. I'm going to talk about the European side of things. I live a little further north than you do. My centre in Mont-le-Soir, it's a little village in the Ardennes, which is some 20 kilometers away from the German border, from the Luxembourg border. Very practical at the moment for the price of fuel, which is much cheaper up there than it is down here, because I took the motorway. But I don't think that's going to last. We are a two-pronged center. We work with the Liège University. I'm in charge of the horse clinic. I'm specialized in surgery and sports medicine. We also do applied research in the field. We go and talk to the breeders, the trainers, the riders. And there is another thing that is becoming more and more important, and that is the economic development in the horse sector. And since the beginning of the year 2000, when we started, we've become a center of excellence for the different types of people who work with horses, with draft horses, with plow horses, use them for logging and forests and so forth. And we have horses who were for example, the first horse that you can see down the bottom, this is a horse that's been with us for 20 years, is still galloping well, and one of our reproducing stallions. So if we actually want to preserve the future of these horses, which is what I want to talk about today, you can see that at the top, the horse is all alone compared to the others. And the problem with these horses, with the heavy horses, draft horses, pleasure horses, the real problem is that they don't have a network of users who would give them added value. The others are trotting, they are show jumping, they're doing dressage, they're doing all sorts of things, which is why their breeds, their races are continuing to flourish, but not the horse that is just a hacking horse. There are certain horses that are productive horses that suffer from other pathologies. We have what we call horses for slaughter in France. And don't forget that the Ardennes horses were the ones who accompanied Napoleon back in the day right up to Russia. And these were light semi-draft horses, rather. There have been all sorts of changes, variations in the race since then, color and so forth. But it is a race, or the use of them today has had an impact on their welfare. There have been other horses who have developed problems of osteoarthritis. You can see osteoarthritis appearing in horses that are only 18 months or 2 years old. And they also have big lymphatic edemas. This is a catastrophe, and it is often what leads these horses to be euthanized or simply slaughtered. And for this type of pathology, there is no treatment. Other uses of the horse. There is, of course, horse meat. We talk about 1,200 births of horses that are simply bred for horse meat per year. Now, I'm very sorry, you probably can't read this, but in Belgium, we eat 80 kilos of horse meat per year per inhabitant, about 600 grams. So even if we change and we eat another type of horse race, it's not going to change anything, particularly in this time and space where everybody is either vegetarian or vegan in any case. You will never be able to actually sell or market horse meat. It wouldn't work. And if you take a look at the meat sector in Belgium, there are enormous problems of horse welfare, problems of transport, problems in the slaughterhouses. When you look at these markets, it's a real scandal. So that approach is one that we are going to have to challenge, we're going to have to query. And it's not by simply promoting the horse for horse meat that we're going to be able to save their races. We have to, the horses that could be used for horse meat are the horses that are incapable of working. We've seen horses that are drawing horse-drawn vehicles or that are being used in horse logging, and some of these horses that can no longer be used for those activities could be sent to the slaughterhouse, or they could simply be used for other types of horse activities, such as hacking or trekking. Here you can see draft horses. There are a lot of them that are used in Belgium. We have horses in the forests, horses in town. And I love this first picture. You see a horse that is pulling a machine. To get horses to work in the countryside or in the forests is not a step backwards to prehistory. They are extremely apt at doing this work. Their performance is something that can be of great benefit. All modern tools that we use can be tracked by horses. Now, in Wallonia, it's a catastrophe. We don't have a lot of these working horses. There are about 166 professional people who work with horses, mainly in forests for logging. About 50 or 60 of them work in forests, and the others use horses for other activities in the villages or in the wetlands. I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but the horse is wonderful for using in the countryside. It literally does no damage at all to the ecosystem, leaves no harsh footprint, far less than agricultural machines. They only have an impact down to 80 centimeters in the soil, whereas we know that with heavy machines in the forests, it's a catastrophe for biodiversity. The horse, of course, will preserve young plants, and we've all seen horrible photos of forests after having been damaged by heavy equipment. So I think that it is at the level of politicians that these things have to change, to oblige people to use horses in wetlands, in ecological areas that should be highly protected. We must put pressure on our politicians so that the horse should be used in these sensitive or vulnerable areas. The profitable advantage of a horse would, of course, be that they can be used in very difficult lands, difficult of access, and also for the very first stage of horse logging. You have the horses, of course, that can therefore pull out the different wood bundles or the faggots, and the horse loggers have today tend to be or in the past were taking heavier and heavier horses because they thought that the horse would have to be as heavy as the log that they were pulling, and that was a mistake. And they're now taking smaller and smaller animals that can get into areas that are inaccessible without damaging the forest. So the horse will become an excellent tool for maintaining forests. Then, of course, you have local activities. You have the different local activities that we've already mentioned, tourism, preserving regional heritage, regional knowledge. We know all of this. The horse also plays a very important societal role. We all know that. And it fully respects all natural habitats and flora and fauna in a context that promotes sustainable development. I very much liked Rowley's speech before. We talk a lot about animal welfare, but just to satiate our own conscience, it's time now to do something about it. There are horses that work, or perhaps who accompany a logger all day in the forest. The horse is not a slave. The horse is a friend. The horse is helping work. Mentalities are changing today, but we have to. We mustn't forget the SPAs, the vegan movement, the vegetarian movement. There's a lot of marketing that would have to be done to prove that animals are not pets, but friends. I've understood the difference between the two. There is a difference between a pet, a profitable animal, and a productive animal. But the horse definitely has its role to play in sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Certain. Vous aussi, vous avez.
Thank you, Mr. Certain. You respected the times perfectly as well. And maybe we could keep in mind that the safeguard of a breed is linked to the way it is being used. we need to make sure that the Ardennes pulling horse has a vocation as a forest horse. So once again, thank you very much for your presentation. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Joran, who told me how to pronounce it, Mr. Joran Åkerström. Mr. Joran Åkerström, who's an FEI veterinary director. I will be giving him the floor. I believe that you would rather be standing as well. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for the kind introduction, and also Didier for presenting the draft horses. I grew up with draft horses, and they are very close to my heart, so it was really lovely to see. Thank you for this kind introduction. I'm honored to be here. This is historical ground for horses, and it's a great privilege to be here and present to you today. So I'm representing Fédération Équestre Internationale, and it's an organization that is a little bit more than 100 years now. We're actually celebrating 100 years now in a month, 1 year late due to COVID. It's going to be a good party anyway. As an organization, we are the governing body of international equestrian sports, and it's an organization that has equine welfare and health at its very core. And this is very particular for my department, the veterinary department. This is what we do on a daily basis. This is how we make our living. And it's really important for us. But it's also important to all the other governing bodies around the world. It's becoming increasingly important because, as said earlier today, there's a lot of pressure on us from animal welfare and animal rights organization, and there are certain parts of what we do that must be improved. And I can assure you that work is ongoing, and we've seen it here today. It was really lovely to see the presentations of the research department here today, and there's a lot of good work ongoing all over the world on this. I also represent the International Horse Sports Confederation. It's formed by FEI and the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities. We're forming the largest global horse industry body together, and we have a public-private partnership with the World Animal Health Organization, the OIE. And it was actually the first public-private partnership that OIE formed. And it's really important. We work more or less on a daily basis with the OIE around the world on various matters. So, further what was said in today's first presentation, horses add value. They add a lot of financial value, but also a lot of employment. So, just in European Union, we have 7 million equids, and they use at least 2.6 million hectares of land. It's an environmentally friendly, non-intensive, and primary rural activity. And the overall turnover is over 50 billion euros per year. And this is enormous. It's a lot of money. And it's an industry that needs to be taken seriously and be supported as well. And we have 500,000 direct and indirect jobs in the European Union on this. So I've been invited to talk about challenges for horse health in Europe today. And I'm going to talk about diseases, antimicrobial drug resistance, prevention. The next one is really about people issues, and I will come to that later, why that is so important. Horse movement, how we can do better in that part. Legislation versus horse industry protocols. Crisis and the effect of horse health. We have two. We have had COVID, and now we have the war in Ukraine, and how that has and will affect our horse's health if we are not very vigilant. and how we solve the solution. As you see of these pictures, it was taken last summer on a venue where they'd done everything right, they thought. But the devil is in the details. So just behind the stables, horses were not supposed to have nose-to-nose contact due to the EHV outbreak. And still, you see, just going behind the scenes, you will see this. So we always need to stay vigilant to protect horse health. So endemic and exotic diseases. Most of you would know about the EHV outbreak that was in Spain last year. I worked at the heart of it. It was a terrible experience. And we had equine influenza in 2019, mainly in UK, but also in other parts of Europe. Strangles is always an ongoing threat in horse populations, especially young horses, sales horses, various places. Strangles will come up and be a problem. These are endemic diseases. They are always present somehow, but we can manage them, and we can manage them in good ways through vaccines and other parts. But they're more or less always around. We also have more exotic diseases, and the most dangerous one, and I would say the biggest challenge, is to make sure we are prepared for an outbreak of African horse sickness. We have the vector. It's spread by a little biting insect. It's a disease that comes from sub-Sahara, but just 2 years ago it was spread by a very irresponsible, again the human factor, from Africa to Thailand. Almost 1,000 horses died. Around between 80 and 90% of the horses that were infected actually died. Extremely serious, and it could happen here. There was an outbreak actually in Spain about 30 years ago, and a big challenge with this is to get vaccines that are good enough and that are available. And this is something that we as industry, together with the authorities, the European Commission and others, need to work to make sure that vaccines are available. And also diagnostic tools. Another disease that you have in southern France now and then is West Nile fever. Spain, Portugal has outbreaks. There are available vaccines, but this is also zoonosis, so it affects humans. I'm surprised that we don't have more cases in Europe. It's moving up. There's been cases even in Poland, and it's something that we need to be also very vigilant about. And then we have the case of equine infectious anemia that used to be endemic. It's a terrible disease, can be spread various ways, but also by big biting insects. There are no vaccines, and horses are normally euthanized if they would be infected. And we have a concern now with the war. It's difficult to keep up good epidemiology during wartime and have these horses coming from Ukraine now, and especially now during the summer, horses are let out in the forest in Ukraine. And what will be their health status? And we are trying to support, we get horses into European Union, but it has to be safe. Otherwise, this could become dangerous and very problematic. Antimicrobial drug resistance. So, what is that? Well, one of the biggest threats for humanity, but also for animals, is that microbes, bacteria, are becoming resistant against the drugs that we are using, penicillin and so on. Therefore, our legislators are trying to protect it, and rightly so. It's great that these are protected for human use. We have a problem, though, and that is this now and then need surgery. It sport horses, other horses, and when you have surgery, you also need antimicrobial drugs. You need penicillin and other stronger substances. The very high value of many horses is also something that you can't really compare them with individual farm animals. So there's a big push to do this surgery, to save this animal, to treat this animal. And we're now under a threat of being legislated that we cannot use the best types of antibiotics. It's a bit unfair. I understand the reason behind, but it's unfair because we can now provide evidence. It's actually done by really good research by France Galop, but also by the FEI. We can show the very limited use of antimicrobial drugs in horse industry, in the professional horse industry. So we think that needs to be taken into consideration when there is new legislation. This is very important for the future of horse health. So I'm going to talk about people issues now. I've been involved with managing infectious outbreaks for more than 20 years now. And the common factor in, I believe, almost all of these has been human error, human failure. And it was very obvious last year with the outbreak in Spain. So many human errors were made that allowed this to happen. So we need to work preventive. That could be vaccinations. Let's see what comes up with the HPV vaccination. Biosecurity protocols. Our legislators must have fair, solid import requirements for that. Everyone needs to be aware, have the knowledge, be vigilant, have the skills to prevent. And it's also this one, even people that know exactly what needs to be done, if they're not doing it, which would happen in Spain, we're going to have disaster anyway. So everyone needs to take responsibility. This is absolutely critical. And this goes especially for vets. So we need to develop a culture of prevention, awareness, and personal responsibility. And this is vital, not just to sport horses, to all horses, because the virus and bacteria, they don't make a difference. Horse movement then. Brexit has been a disaster for the horse industry. Organizers here in France get half of the starters in eventing than they are expecting. The breeding industry, thoroughbred breeding industry, is bleeding tremendously. So what was really functional, you see this picture, 2017, the movement, UK, France, Ireland, with thoroughbreds, extremely efficient and absolutely crucial, is no longer. And this has very serious impact on finances, but also horse health, because people that can't afford having their finances up, those horses are at risk of starting moving around into places where you don't want them. And we don't want Rowley having to save them in that situation. It's better to be preventive. This could be resolved by reviewing the conditions for third countries. And UK is now a third country, as is Ukraine and other United States and so on. If you change those requirements, this could be resolved quite easily. The horse industry has developed digital solutions that could provide for seamless, digital, very, very safe identification, as well as movement of horses across borders within and also into European Union. Systems are in place already. We can do this. And remove the VAT on short-term horse movement. That is really important. National legislation, international frameworks, etc., versus horse industry protocols. So we have, the developed horse industry has really good jurisdiction, is very strong, especially now after the Spanish outbreak. We have the protocols and we have the control systems. Digitally based, we can follow each and every horse whenever we want. We did that we're still doing it with horses in California now, from Lausanne, and it works. We can follow them. We see where they are. It's very safe, and we can provide those systems. And that is better than that we have restrictive legislation on endemic diseases such as strangles or equine herpes virus type 1, because we are now at risk of being legislated for that. There's a request from European Commission to the European Food Safety Authority on that part, and it's something that concerns us a lot. We're working on that. okay, this is the last one, the second to last, sorry. I'm sorry for that. So crisis, COVID, financial impact, I mentioned that. But Ukraine war is also a risk for increased risk for infectious diseases and also feed shortage in the long term. We need to be aware of that and prepare and plan for that. So working together, especially between industries, like we're doing with racing, and I think you do really well here in France. You have a superb system here in France with IFSA supporting the industry. That is not the case in many countries. So IFSA, what you're doing is very important, and to be in France with horses, I think you have great opportunities. But I think that can also be copied in many other European Union countries. It will strengthen the horse industry because we're in this together and we need to work together. Thank you, and apologies for taking more time than I should.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ackerstrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eckerstrom. You were quite right to flag these issues of biosecurity that have been exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine. You also reminded us of the importance of a culture of prevention and the threats that exist to the horses sector via the health of the horses. So thank you very much. And we're now going to be giving the floor to our European MP. I wanted this to be at the very heart of this roundtable of horses used in agriculture because he embodies all of the qualifications of all of the people at this round table, breeding, Bourgogne, European legislation, health, and sustainable development. Thank you very much, Sylvie. Oh, gosh, how am I going to live up to that? I'll try to answer a little bit of all of this. No, I'll just stay seated. I'm quite comfortable, thank you. I, first of all, would like to thank the President for having invited me here. Also, thank you very much from Monsieur Gaillet. Thank you very much for inviting us here onto this wonderful site that I have never been able to visit before, but I was able to take a good look at it this morning. And if I have the opportunity, it would be with great pleasure that I would come back. I would also like to say, to welcome all of my other colleagues, other parliamentarians here today, thank them for what they're doing for the horse, and to thank each and every one of you who has just spoken. Thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for your capacity to hit the nail on the head when it comes to your different specificities. I think that our mayor has left, but I am like him. I am no horse specialist, but I do know to what extent the horse, its production and its diversity is so important for agriculture. And before beginning to talk about the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, I'd like to spare a thought, please, for the Ukrainian people, the men, the women, and particularly for Ukrainian agriculture. Quite apart from the total, brutal, and cruel nature of this war, there are a lot of questions that are being raised as to their capacity to be able to continue to farm and continue to feed their people. We, I believe, no matter what we work in, have the responsibility of thinking of them and continuing to think about what we should be doing to help them at a later stage and also perhaps help other peoples at a later stage who find themselves equally in such difficulty. So please let us spare a thought for Ukrainian farmers as well. And this leads me to say that we are extremely lucky in Europe because we have agriculture, we have food production that is enshrined in very solid rules and regulations. In fact, some that are the most efficient in the world over. We, rather than forever blaming the farming world and agriculture, we should be putting it forward and recognizing the excellent quality of our agriculture in Europe. And I think that it is the horse in all of its diverse forms that contributes to enrich this facet of our economies and our environment. So let's be proud. Let's try to step up to the plate and be ready to tackle the future problems rather than already criticizing what we do. We have one of the finest agricultural policies in the world. Let's be proud of it. On the CAP, more specifically, the CAP, the CAP exists for the horse as well. It exists for every agricultural sector. So there are certain elements in the common agricultural policy that I could, of course, bring up with you, but not everything will interest you. There is, however, the definition of active agriculture. What should be done to maintain the world of the horse, whereas each member state is going to have to define in the future exactly what an active farmer is. Then there is the issue of sustaining diversification. The second pillar of the CAP would have to include the horse. As we mentioned earlier, how can we support breeds of horses that are threatened today so that in the future, thanks to the common agricultural policy, we will be able to accompany these races these breeds of horses that are threatened today. We have to be able to anticipate that, to preempt those problems. And I think that the common agricultural policy should also be raising those questions. Then there are questions concerning the different compensation for disability, invalidity and disability. I think that that should also be taken into account in the equine world. And then something else that is not new in the CAP, but we have taken a new look at it this year because we are extending all of this extending what we call the operational programs to all of the different sectors. And I think that for the horse meat sector, some of these tools should be used. Yes, they are economic tools, but they could also help the sector to continue to contribute even further than what it contributes today. Above and beyond the common agricultural policy, there are also other aspects that have been raised here, such as the law on animal health and also the regulations on animal welfare. Sylvie introduced me earlier, but I too am a breeder. I don't breed horses, I breed Charolais cows. And I think that everybody here in this room knows, but we must remind others, there is no breeder, livestock breeder, nobody who looks after an animal, who has the responsibility of an animal, who would have any interest in having that animal mistreated. Economically, there is no gain in having an animal that is mistreated, and for all sorts of other reasons as well. There is no reason to mistreat an animal. On the contrary, we should try to look at what has already been done rather than criticizing, be it in the equine world or in the bovine world. What's already been done? What about the transporting of animals? I'm a breeder. I remember the state of the trucks that we used to have to load our beasts into in the past and the types of trucks that we are seeing today. And I think there comes a time where, yes, of course, there is always room for improvement, but for goodness sake, let's not continue to criticize things that have got so much better. So there are always things that we could do better, and I think that Europe must do its best to design all of these regulations, but with the help of those who work professionally in the different sectors. In France, I don't know whether we have anybody who are from the regional council here or from the actual region, but it is the region today that actually influences the way the second pillar of the CAP is actually rolled out. There is a lot of discussion about equine activities. Horse breeding is a farming activity. It is an agricultural activity, and it must be recognized as such. There is also a need for us to work hand in hand as we move forward. I'm absolutely certain that my fellow breeders would be extremely annoyed with me if I didn't talk about the VAT. We need a correct VAT rate. And this is for the equine sector as well as other sectors. We need to find the courage to actually get down to the nitty-gritty of those discussions about VAT so that we can come up with a fair result. I know that work is being done on that. I know that we've worked on that in France and in Europe. And France, too, should perhaps try to be exemplary so that we can move forward as we should. So just to finish, thank you once again for having invited me here today. Thank you for having given me the opportunity to talk a little bit about Europe. And I repeat once again that the success of the equine professions will stem directly from whether or not the horse sector can actually work all together. I know that you are more than ready to do that today. You are entirely motivated, but it is only by working together that we will get anywhere. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le député.
Thank you. Thank you for this speech that was perfect. Maybe not to conclude the roundtable because we will have a few questions, but mostly because you placed the horse back at the very core of Europe. You talked about the excellency of agriculture and everything that we are implementing in order to be proud of the work of breeders, farmers, and all professionals of the horse industry. Everything that you are implementing, senators, members of parliament, MEPs, in order to be at the service of the recognition of how important this horse sector is. Who would like to take the floor? Who would like to raise a question? Who would like maybe, Madam Member of Parliament, maybe you would like to make a comment? Someone in the room? Mr. Director General, would you like to say something? Madam Deputy Director General, she's gone with the microphone, but she's not saying anything. No questions? No questions at all? Madam, ladies and gentlemen, I believe this means you responded in a great way to all the stakes raised during this roundtable. Oh, we do have a question. We do have a question. Very well. Please introduce yourself. My name is Sylvie Doaret. I work for the Ministry of Ecology, of the Environment. The question I wanted to raise is the following. The topic is horse in agriculture. So my question is the following, and I'm talking especially to Mr. De Cercle. So today, what are the commitments, the practices on which farmers envisage to use the horse? What is actually the place of the horse as a tool in order to serve the farmer in tomorrow's productions? Well, thank you very much. I believe that this should be developed. We talked about the wine sector. We said that those are ongoing practices, but practices that we are also developing and that we keep on developing. And I do believe that if we are to respond to the society expectation when it comes to environment issues, especially the reduction of pesticides, for instance, well, if we have the possibility to use the horse more in order to find some techniques and identify alternatives, this will have to be developed. Now, I do not have concrete examples, but this should be built with the professionals of the horse industry, the professionals of agriculture, what means can be found. We are moving forward in the wine industry, but there are probably other productions as well. We can find a certain utility to the horse, of course, while respecting animal welfare and well-being. But I do not have concrete examples, but we should be building this. And in order to do this, as politicians, as public powers, we should make sure that the means are available. Often when we talk about environment and animal well-being, well, we have requirements that are very high and are perfectly justified, but unfortunately, those requirements are not matched with the necessary means in order to make sure that farmers and the various sectors are actually able to work in that direction. Yes, let me come back on this. You say you are coming from the Ministry of the Environment. Well, we were auditioned many times by associations who are using the horses, working horses, to collect waste or in agriculture, but they do not receive help from the ADEME or from the Ministry of the Ecology. So maybe we should try and identify what is going wrong. If you will allow me, given that I was provided surveys carried out by the IFCE before the preparation of the roundtable, we talk a lot about co-pastures between equines and bovines in order to give value to the fields, to the land that stock 85 tons of CO2 per hectare. It allows a floral biodiversity. It also fights against the closing down of landscapes. And when it comes to the energy, let's remember that the horse is a force when it comes to energy, but the horse is also producing energy because it creates 100 kilos of natural fertilizer per day. So there is a lot that can actually be done we have 1.2 million equines in France, and we saw together with our speakers that we are talking about 7 million equines in Europe. So this is a soft energy, but that can be valued and used for environmental issues. Now, thank you very much. Maybe we will conclude the roundtable. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to all speakers.